Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is your boy, Coach Stutzer, or Kyle Stutzer, or for the people who've been listening to the podcast for many years, CIZZY, you dig? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Voices of Value podcast. It is 2025, and it's crazy to think we've been recording episodes since like 2017, 2018. So if you've been here with me since the beginning, I always want to start the show off with saying, I love you. I appreciate you. But the most important thing about the Voices of Value podcast is bringing individuals onto the show to share their journey, share their story, share their experiences, so that hopefully you guys can be inspired, informed, or entertained, but mostly inspired or informed to make good decisions in your life, whether it's in business or health and fitness or just with any version of, you know, self-growth. So with that being said, we have another guest today. I will let her introduce herself, but first and foremost, thank you for coming on to the show. Go ahead and let the people know who you are, where you're from, and you know, give us your little elevator pitch, your little spiel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. My name is Hallie Young. I am a public health professional and personal trainer slash group fitness instructor. I am originally from DC, East Coast, but been in LA working in public health and training for about 6 years.
Nice. DC baby. All right. So I got a few questions for the DC babies. I always got to ask. So my girlfriend is Ethiopian. When you were growing up in DC, did you feel like you really saw Ethiopians everywhere? Because I heard DC is like Ethiopia, little Ethiopia for America, but maybe that wasn't your experience.
Yes, 100%. Grew up eating bomb Ethiopian food, which was amazing. And I know LA has some of that, but definitely missing it.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Let's start there though. So how did your family end up in DC? And then, talk to me a little bit about your childhood, maybe one or two highlight memories from growing up in DC. Maybe it's going to some of the legendary museums and national historical spots they have. Maybe it's going to the local pool. Maybe it has something to do with working out. Who knows? But talk to me a little bit about how your family ended up in DC and just a tad bit about your childhood, maybe some fun early memories.
Yeah, both of my parents, well, my dad was born and raised in the area. He grew up in Maryland. My mom moved down for grad school. So I grew up in DC in the city my whole entire life. Contrary to popular belief, there are actually DC locals, and there are DC locals who are not politicians. My family in particular was not in politics. We were not there for politics. My dad was a filmmaker, and my mom was in education. Um, I love DC. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think it's the best city in the country. Um, just because I feel like it's such a unique place. There's such a unique and warm and welcoming culture there. And I think that uh, all of my childhood memories that stick out and all of the things that made me who I am are the community and the power of the people that exist there. So I feel really grateful to have grown up in a really diverse, in a lot of ways, city, and to still be connected to friends and family from there to this day. And I'd say probably the other thing that comes to mind that I think a lot of people are surprised to find out about me is that I grew up in bilingual school. So I grew up speaking
Oh, wow.
Spanish,
Oh, wow.
um, which a lot of people find out for the first time when I open my mouth to speak Spanish. Um, but that also shaped just a lot of my childhood and my interactions in the very best way.
I love that. And how long were you in bilingual school? Was that like literally K through 12, or is that like, eighth, ninth, and 10th grade? Like, talk to me a little bit about how long you spent in bilingual school and kind of, I know it's not the topic of the conversation, but I want to talk a little bit about how is that structured? Is it like every single class is 100% in Spanish, but if you don't understand what the teacher says, then they shift to English? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so I went to a bilingual elementary school, so I was there pre-K through sixth grade. Um, At the time, it was the only public bilingual school in DC. So it was a blend of kids from all over the city, both kids who were coming from immigrant families who their parents found it really important for them to keep up the Spanish, and then people who really wanted their kids to learn Spanish. My family was a little bit unique in that. Some of my family is Salvadorian. My brother is adopted. He's Mexican American. And so um, some of my family already spoke Spanish. My fa parents felt it was really important for my brother and I to grow up speaking Spanish. And I said to say that it was a very much a blended community. And the way that the school worked was that we did half our day in English and half our day in Spanish. So it wasn't
Mm.
Spanish lessons. It would be like we have math, science, and history in Spanish, and then we have language arts and PE in English. So
Wow.
yeah, great experience. Honestly, could not
Hell yeah.
recommend more, and definitely was really helpful for really immersing myself in the language and becoming fluent in
For
a way
sure.
that I don't know that I would have been able to otherwise.
Absolutely. And man, it's so essential. I think, we won't get into like the political aspect of things. It all depends on the type of person you are, but more or less, I think if you're a common sense individual, you realize how important it is to learn a few different languages like Spanish. And I guess the other one I would say is probably Mandarin. Um, but like when we think about business and global economies and how we all, you know, whether we like it or not, interact in business, especially when we get older and companies do business overseas. And there's other markets that are growing really fast in India and China that are slowly and slowly starting to compete with America. And you want to figure out ways to like collaborate as an adult. It's probably ideal to learn their language, and it's a leg up. Or on the flip side, if we're home based and we're domestic, the amount of beautiful people that come here from Central America, South America, Mexico, and work in, like literally, actually, literally right outside the window. You know what I'm saying? Like just people and being able to communicate with your counterparts in your neighborhood, in your village, in your workspace is just super important. So I love that. And people don't realize it's important until they're put in a situation where they need to utilize that skill set and they don't have it. AKA me. But man, that's a special experience. What's the age difference between you and your brother?
We are 3 years apart. Mhm.
Okay, so pretty close. Talk to me a little bit about growing up with a brother that's not too much older or younger?
Younger. He's younger.
Younger than you. So, um, were you competitive at a young age with him? Were you guys like, oh, I can run faster. No, I can run faster, or I can dive from the higher diving board. Talk to me a little bit about, that, 6 to 15 age time period where you're growing up with a younger brother. And I'm assuming that you went into public health and training that you might have an athletic background, maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But tell me a little bit more about how that was, and were you guys competitive? Did you guys play sports together?
Um, I don't think of us as competitive. It's funny. I feel like there's always in sibling relationships some period of time where like you're not each other's favorite person. And I feel like maybe my brother and I had a little bit of that when we were really young, but I honestly don't remember that ever being a vivid part of our relationship. I think we were always relatively close, and we're obviously relatively close in age, and a lot of time weren't necessarily in school together, so it's not like we were hanging out 24/7
Mhm.
growing up. But I feel like we've always had a really good relationship. It's definitely gotten stronger as we've gotten older and just, you know, adulting. Um, but I am very grateful for him and for that relationship in general. And I think it's always been a pretty good one. And I think that can be unique to say.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm appreciative of that. Um, Funnily enough, he was definitely the athletic one growing up. I had no athletic background until I was an adult, which I feel like a lot of people are surprised to find out now that
Yeah.
I'm so heavily in fitness. Um, but I think that's one of the reasons that I ended up getting into fitness in a professional way, because for sure growing up, it was like my brother had the crew practices and the soccer games, and I was like, what do you mean running? I don't do that. And it wasn't until after college that, or I guess maybe senior year of college, that I really got into working out and taking care of my body. And I think one of the things, among other things, which we can get into, that drove me to seek a career in fitness is I really felt like if I can do it as somebody who literally would skip my mile practice in the eighth grade PE class, then like anybody can. And I feel like I can be a conduit for that because I understand what it is to come from a space of you don't even know what it looks like to work out to, oh, I'm an adult and I want to take care of my body and I don't know how to do that now. So, yes, ironically enough, he was definitely the athletic one, but now I'm the one who's getting him in the gym, but he's on it now. I will say I'm very
Sh-
impressed.
Shout out to little bro. Shout out to little bro. I love that. And yeah, I think that's such a true, you know, true statement. I had a client today I was talking to, and I was saying, "Oh, like I was just complimenting her abs, and I was like, abs are popping." She's like, "You know what? Thank you for saying that because," and she went on to share a story, which was just that she had two really tough pregnancies. And she was sharing that like she had put on like 60 pounds exactly on the number on both pregnancies, which I guess in her family was like a lot. Um, and that naturally, just through the having the baby process and a few months after, she did, naturally transition back towards her normal weight. But the last 15 pounds, she said on both pregnancies were like super challenging, but she was super committed to like, you know, getting back to where she felt healthy, strong, and good. And what she was saying she was thankful for about that experience is she now has a respect for because she grew up always in shape, always relatively lean, always pretty active. And so she used to be like, oh, it's not that hard. Like just eat less or whatever it might be that people, commonly say, or, just make better decisions. Just don't eat at McDonald's. Just go on a walk, whatever simple things, however we like to simplify it as people who are already active. She said that that experience really showed her how difficult it is to be number one, consistent when it comes to nutrition, specifically in the caloric deficit, because that changes a lot of things. You can eat it healthy all you want, but if you still have a tendency to overeat due to a multitude of factors, which we can talk about, then it's still going to be hard. So she's just talking about how she appreciates that. So I'm sure like your experience gave you, a lot of insight into what it means to create new habits around health and fitness, what it means to make good food decisions, what it means to prioritize your sleep, what it means to, and so on and so forth. So let's jump into that a little bit more. Pre 2016, what was your lifestyle like what were you doing like let's say 17 until whatever age like what were you doing? You staying up late? Were you a big partier, or were you just like chilling, just not active? Talk to me a little bit about pre fitness, pre active Haley.
Yeah, I'd say probably somewhere in between. I mean, pre 2016, I was in college and I think I probably lived a pretty typical like average college student lifestyle in the sense that I wasn't necessarily going crazy, but I also, you know, I went out with my friends. I ate whatever I wanted. I did sleep schedule was non-existent. I was, studying, hanging out, all of those things. And I think I felt okay at the time, but I definitely didn't really know how to take care of myself and what to do if I didn't feel okay. And one of the things that spurred my interest in starting to work out is hopefully this is okay to, talk about on the podcast, but I was actually prescribed a bad birth control and it had really horrible side effects for me, one of which was gaining a lot of weight to your point about this woman with pregnancy that's a whole different that's so different than being like, oh, I just overate or I didn't move and I gained weight. That's like, I'm doing something that my doctor prescribed to me that's now causing these side effects for me that I have no control over. Or I do have control, but I'm not sure how to navigate. And I wasn't anticipating this. This has never happened to me before. And so I think that was a bit of a catalyst for me to be like, oh, if I want to do things about not only how I look, but really how I feel, then I need to take some of this into my own hands and not only to see changes physically and mentally, but also to be able to make informed decisions so that in the future, as I'm encountering health professionals, as I'm getting advice, I mean, now we get so much advice on social media that's impossible to weed through, that I am able to say, you know what, I know enough about this for myself to make an informed decision about what works and what doesn't. So I still have to say that I think I was living a pretty, yeah, average college student lifestyle, but I was never really approaching it from a place of like, how am I going to feel and show up as my best self? And I think that's okay because I was young. And I think that anybody who is in college or still trying to navigate and learn, um, it's okay to not be the perfect model of health every day. Like to me, health is so much more than just eating well and working out and things like that. Like it's genuinely feeling good about yourself and your life. And so I believe that that looks a lot like balance in a lot of areas of your life. Um, but I also think that it's important for people to feel empowered to make decisions that are in their best interest and in the best interest of their health.
I love that. I love that. And that made me want to go so many different ways, but to try to stay somewhat on a dialed in focus. Talk to me a little bit, once you did have that experience and you were forced to kind of reconsider what health means to you and how to be intentional about it. What were some of your early resources that you used to become more informed about what it means to be healthy and develop your own perspective and your own framework around that? I know for me, like getting introduced to reading certain books at school, and then those books, somebody mentioning some person that I looked up on IG, then I look up on IG and I'm like, okay, they're not active on there, but they record a podcast. I listen to the podcast. They tell me to read this book, and so on and so forth. So I know I have like a multitude of podcasts and specific human beings who really shaped my perspective around training, around nutrition, around mind health, around the wellness spectrum, and what all do we include on our wellness spectrum, from financial wellness to social wellness to all the things that contribute to our overall health. There's people that like put that in my brain or pointed me in a direction to go research that. Who were those early educators or informers or people for you, or shows or TV or movie? Like what what did you use to educate yourself at that time?
Yeah, I'd say I went a couple of different directions in terms of like mental well-being and just overall how I felt about my life internally. Um, I'm not sure how I found them, but I think what I ended up doing was listening to podcasts, reading books, stuff like that. I swear by this one Vietnamese monk who really got me into mindfulness and meditation. He actually passed a few years ago, but his name is Thich Nhat Hanh, and I read a lot of his books and got really interested in mindfulness and learning to be present and those types of things. And then I would listen to podcasts like Jay Shetty, some of those. For fitness, honestly, at first, really like social media, which I think is another one of the reasons that I got into fitness because, um, or got into training fitness as a profession because at the time I didn't know who to look at or what to do or anything like that. And so I would literally like go on Pinterest and see what workouts people wrote out or what things that I could do in the gym. And I was definitely one of those girls who's like, I'm shy. I don't want to do the free weights. What do you mean, barbell? Like, not because I didn't want to lift weights. I was just like, I don't know how to do this stuff. Um, and interestingly enough, I think all of those things are great resources. I think social media can be an incredible tool. And in some ways, it was so helpful in terms of just like getting me moving and me being like, oh, I can just Google this workout and I can do this in my house. And I'm a big believer that people should do movement that they enjoy and that something is better than nothing. And so, um, this is definitely not to knock that at all because I think in some ways those resources are so valuable. on the flip side, the more that I learned about actually developing training goals and being intentional about not only physique goals, but also like building muscle and building strong bones and things like that, I was like, oh my gosh, these Pinterest workouts were not getting me anywhere to what I imagined. Like somebody telling me to do 20 glute bridges and 20 crunches. If I had a first-time client walk in my door who was like, I want to lose 10 pounds or build my butt, I would never be like, do 20 glute bridges and 20 crunches. And so I think that stuff was also informative for me. It was a great starting point to be like, here's a free resource. I can just learn things by Googling. And also, it was informative to me to be like, okay, now I can become a resource for other people and I can give or attempt to give credible research, science-backed, evidence-based information to actually help people achieve their goals versus what I think a lot of newbies do, which is Google, rightfully so, and get swamped with all this information that they don't know what to do with. So that's kind of where I started. And then it also really helped me be like, oh, I think I could teach people some things based on all the things that I've learned through this process.
I love that. I love that. And you touched on both mental and physical. I'm wondering if just because I mentioned the term wellness spectrum now it makes me wonder. So when I say wellness spectrum, I'm typically thinking about different aspects of our life that contribute to our overall wellness, right? So it could be financial wellness, it could be occupational, like how happy are we at our jobs? Do we enjoy our work? Do we feel fulfilled? Do we feel like we're constantly
Yeah.
being ambitious and chasing goals? Obviously mental like you shared, physical like you shared, spiritual, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe that's a connection with God, or maybe it's a community, like a religious community. And maybe it's, I don't know, sun gazing with a community of people. I don't know. But like there's financial wellness. Like how do I feel educated and informed about how to handle my finances and make good decisions around saving and investing? So I'm wondering if you don't have to do all of them, if you could touch on maybe one or two more in terms of maybe social wellness, like how you built a friend group that you felt you could trust and enjoyed time with. Maybe it's occupational, like how did you end up choosing your degree and feeling good about that? Could be financial, or are there any people you looked up to from a financial perspective and read books on? But just wondering if there was any other people that inspired you across that arena of different categories that impact your wellness.
Yeah, I think that truly I feel most inspired by the people around me, like the people that I know. And um, I do get inspiration from public figures and authors and things like that. But I think more than anything, um, the people that have guided my trajectory or that I look up to in terms of how I want to live my life and how I want to show up in the world are the people around me. My parents have been super impactful in how I see my wellness. They've always been very encouraging of building your own path and walking that path to the fullest. And I'm really, really, especially the older I get, really grateful to have had the space to explore what it looks like to build my own path and also to live in that. And just to make that, I guess, a little more concrete, I think as you mentioned, social wellness, right? My friends always joke that I collect friends because I am friends with people from literally every season of my life, from elementary school, high school, college, post-college, grad school, all of the things. Um, and I think that growing up in DC, growing up in my schools with my family, community was always such a big thing. And I wouldn't be who I am today without my community. And I also think that I'm a big believer that we are nothing without community. And so I think that has shaped both who I am in the sense that my people nurture me and I do my best to nurture my people, but also has shaped my life philosophy, right? I think that community is a huge reason why we show up in fitness. We empower each other to be our best selves and to show up for each other and to build up strong individuals so that our networks are strong. Um, and then another way that that has showed up is just that my if anybody that I know listens to this, they're gonna laugh at me, but my parents travel a lot. And they've always traveled a lot, and therefore they've always encouraged me to travel a lot. And so even as a kid, like when I was 16, I moved abroad and I went to go live with a family that I had never met before because I had just decided like I really want to study abroad and experience another culture and go somewhere else. And I literally lived in Uruguay for 6 months and didn't speak English for 6 months because I lived with a Spanish-speaking family. Um, and I think that my parents for sure were really good role models of being adventuresome and stepping out of your comfort zone and values like that that I think not only have stuck with me until now, but have really just shaped my trajectory in life. So I say that to say that I think that the people around me are the people that inspire me the most, and I feel really, 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 really grateful to be surrounded by really incredible humans that um, I think just make me want to be a better person in every facet of my life.
I love it. I love it. And I think when we think about the words community, and when we think about the words wellness and health and fitness, and we combine the two of them, you could kind of say that that's public health in a way.
Yes,
So
much so.
you see me try. Y'all saw that segue, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all see that segue?
Yes.
Pat
The
myself on my
reason
back
for
real
the
quick.
season, yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, talk to me a little bit about your decision to study public health, how that came about, and then we'll dive into, informing people who listen to this podcast a little bit more about what the hell that even is.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, like I said, I feel like community as a value, as a concept, as a lived experience, has always been very central to my life in general on a personal and professional level. Um, and I think the other thing that has been core throughout my career is that I've always been interested in doing mission-driven work. I feel very called to do work that is in service of others and in service of something bigger than myself. And so post-college, I wasn't really sure what that looked like. I got my undergrad degree in communications and I went into nonprofit work and I started doing work with an organization that was working on multi-generational policies to moving families out of poverty. And so we worked on everything from health and wellness to economic supports to post-secondary education to childcare, all those things. And that experience was really foundational for me to start to see health as the foundation for thriving for kids and families. Um, and so that's kind of the conclusion I came to while I was in that work. And I was doing that work for about 3 years. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm really interested in this health piece. But my background is in comms and program management, and I don't know that much about what public health actually looks like. And so that's what inspired me to go back to school. I got my master's at UCLA in 2021. I was there from 2019 to 2021. Um, I think it was one of the better career decisions that I've made in my life. I really do feel like I will be in public health for the rest of my life. I feel really, really passionately about it. Um, I think, like I said, if we don't have community, we have nothing, and that really drives just my personal, professional life philosophy. And I'm a big believer that it's critical for us to build systems that support individual and communal well-being. And that is essentially what public health is. It is building those systems at every level, at the individual level, to the relational level, to the community level, to the big like policy macro level. Um, And I do think a lot of people hear that word and they think healthcare, but it is so much more than that. It is everything that contributes to exactly what you referred to, that wellness spectrum. So anything that facilitates the improvement of financial well-being, anything that facilitates the improvement of physical well-being, of mental well-being. Um, and so it encompasses a lot of things. But I think that's a good thing. I think that what it means is more the orientation towards building a world that facilitates health, and health can look different for different people, but everything fits into that worldview.
Yeah, and I feel like there that in public health you can get so granular about what that looks like, and there's probably so many like subcategories of how you can be involved in the public health ecosystem from like a career perspective or just volunteering or nonprofit or paid or whatever you're doing or a company. I feel like there's so many subcategories. So if you were to like think about over the past few years, like the main areas you've been giving a lot of attention to that really like draw your attention and like you're just really passionate about, what would you say those subcategories would be? Because I feel like when I was trying to learn about more about what public health was a few years ago, like one of the graphics that it showed was literally like it was like literally 100 webs. Like the circle was like public health, and then it
Yeah.
literally had like 150 webs where it's like individual well finance this then this subcategory this. So it's like it could encompass so much. So what have you been focused on personally, and what's been drawing your attention? Or I don't know if you currently work for a company in the public health space right now, but if you do, what is your guys's primary area of focus? I know I just asked you like 12 questions, but answer however you'd like.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. So I do work in public health now. I currently work on an initiative that's around reducing the impacts of childhood trauma and reducing the impacts of or reducing the chance of tr the chronic stress that can come from untreated childhood trauma that is associated with 9 of the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. Um, Before that, I was working on a couple different projects, but I'd say that the main focus of my professional work has generally been around kind of the intersection of child development and creating protective environments for child physical and mental health, and also treating some of the challenges that kids face to prevent future disease or negative health outcomes. And then that kind of intersects with what we call the social determinants of health, which are the things in your environment that have an impact on your health, whether that's your family socioeconomic status, race, gender, things like that, that play a role in health outcomes. And when I say health outcomes, I mean like whether or not people are getting diseases, whether or not people are developing disabilities, things like that.
I love that, and thank you for sharing that. Now I'm gonna do like my go-to way to get more information, which is number one, what is childhood trauma? Like for somebody who has no experience with trauma, no understanding. Let me not say no experience because who am I to say that? For someone who's not familiar with like trauma in general, how would you describe like from like not from like a super granular perspective, but a broad perspective, what trauma is and what childhood trauma looks like for children who are like actually like still children, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So the work that I do is around what a term called adverse childhood experiences, which are experiences that have been like medically categorized as potentially causing trauma for kids. And so there are a list of 10 ACEs that someone could have experienced, and there are screenings and there are different tools for identifying what people have experienced and how those experiences have impacted their health and their situations. Those things are, there's 10 of them. They include things like potential sexual abuse. They include parents getting a divorce, a parent being incarcerated, things like that. And then in recent years, there's been more and more work done around the trauma that can exist outside a child's home. And those are things that we would call like adverse childhood environments. So it could be um, living in a neighborhood that has low socioeconomic status. It could be experiencing institutional racism, things like that, that have the potential to be traumatic events for an individual.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I don't love that that's happening, but I love you know what I'm saying? I love that.
Neither.
I think people just don't think about public health, you know what I'm saying? Like, period. And so when we break it down into all the different ways that an individual human or a child, like child, an adult, a teenager can be impacted, and the impact that that has on them at that specific period of life, and how that can, transition into even worse health outcomes as life continues on, especially when not addressed. I think it just needs more attention. So, before I get lost in what I was about to say, what I want to know is, what do the conversations look like at work or amongst your coworkers when you're trying to figure out solutions or pathways to helping these children? Like, I guess I can be like, okay, what's childhood trauma? Okay, you work with, okay, but like, the next question, I guess, in a non-rude way is, what are you doing? Like, what, uh, what does that look like on a day to day? What are the conversation? Where do you go with that? Is it like active work directly with children? Is it policy? Is it, try to jump into answering that however you can, because that wasn't a really clear question.
Sure. No, no, no. I definitely can. But if you don't mind, I just want to touch on two things that you just said that I think are, are really helpful to get into. One of which is what you said about like people not thinking about public health, which, to be honest, in a perfect world, the point is that the public health system is so good that people don't have to think about it, right? You don't have to think about where you're going to get care if you get sick. You don't have to think about how you're going to afford it because you have a healthcare plan that you know will cover your healthcare. You know that you can access a hospital right down the street. You know that if you step into that hospital, you're going to get adequate, accessible, not too expensive, non-biased care. You know that if you wake up one morning and you walk out of your street, you're going to be able to walk on a paved sidewalk. You're not going to experience violence in your community. You're going to get to school just fine. Your school is going to be accessible. You're going to have access to a good education. Then you can go to the grocery store down the street and you can get organic vegetables for an affordable price. That is a public health system working well when nobody has to think about it. So I will, that's one thing. On top of that, I do think people don't think about it, but everybody interacts with a public health system. We live in these systems, right? There's fluoride in your water to protect your teeth. There are vaccines that you got as a kid that are protective so that you never have to experience a disease you've never heard of because it's been inoculated in your community because of these vaccines. Again, you're existing in a system, hopefully, where you don't have to think about walking down the street and breaking your ankle because there's no sidewalk, because the sidewalk is already there and already a part of your community. All of those things are public health systems already at work. And I think that one of the things that our field has experienced, particularly in the last few years, is definitely more interest in the field, which I think has been great. But also, I think that has raised the knowledge to your point that a lot of people, rightfully so, don't think about these systems because they're meant to be preventative. Public health working well means that people are living healthy lives and they are not experiencing some of these non-natural causes of disease, death, disability, etc. And so that's the goal for us, that we are able to build these systems. And I think the challenge can be that because they're supposed to be preventative, if you're not seeing a problem, you don't think it needs a solution sometimes. But the goal for me, and I think I know for everybody in public health, and I hope for everybody outside of public health as well, is to prevent injury, disease, all of these things. And so my hope is that that becomes more part of the public discourse and that people are able to rally more and more around this idea that, like, actually, we don't want our kids to even have to experience sickness and trauma and chronic stress, right? I don't want my kids to be stressed and or experiencing mental health challenges. And so what I want is a community that has all these systems and tools and people in place to create a supportive environment so that that doesn't even have to happen down the road. Um, so hopefully that gives a little more context onto the public health piece. And then um, I lost my train of thought. I wanted to say something about what you just asked.
First off, what you just said was fire, so it's probably enough. But nah, that
Oh,
was
there's
good. That
more
was
things
super
I just wanted
essential.
to add. You said people don't think about public health. Oh, that's what it was. Um, the other thing is about trauma, right? So I think that, like I said, we have this list of ACEs that is medical, that we have developed screenings and tools and tests and scientific studies around. And I think that sometimes that leads to those tools are very important. And it is important to be able to acknowledge that there are certain situations that do cause trauma and cause harm and the negative effects of that harm can absolutely be prevented. And we can stop cycles of that. But we have a lot of people walking around with a lot of trauma, to your point. And I think that um, one of the things that we also don't often talk about is that every single one of us has experienced trauma, and particularly in the environment that we're living in now, everybody has experienced or is experiencing some level of trauma. And so, even in public health, our conversations have evolved over the past few years, especially post-COVID, about what that looks like because it was in the 80s and 90s, true that we had this list of 10 things, right? But now every single child who has gone through COVID has experienced trauma. That is a trauma to be totally taken out of your normal life, to have to interact socially solely online, totally reshapes how you experience the world, how your brain is wired, things like that. The access to social media, we are all seeing and experiencing trauma on a 24-hour news cycle all the time, all day, that does something to your brain and how you interact with the world. Um, and then thankfully, we've evolved to understand that things like institutional racism also cause trauma in the same way that an individual being abused by an individual causes trauma. There are also things in our systems that are causing trauma. And I raise that to say that um, I think it's something that we are learning to talk about better. But I also think that it's beneficial for us to acknowledge that all of us have experienced a degree of trauma, and based on who you are and your experiences and how you show up in the world, the level of that trauma is different. But when we can approach things from the perspective of all of us are healing from something, then it allows us to also show up in a more compassionate and community-oriented way. And I think it just opens doors for us to show up better for each other and to be more understanding of each other and of ourselves, because we also need to be giving ourselves grace for having gone through all the things that we've gone through. Um, which that can segue to some of the things that we do in my work. Um, so the initiative that I work for is, I'd say, primarily focused on primary care, right? On the experience that people are having when they go into a clinic for medical care. We work a lot with pediatricians and with family physicians to have them screen for different types of trauma and to both treat trauma in clinic to the best of their abilities and also to refer out to organizations. Let's say it turns out that somebody has experienced severe trauma and really needs additional support than what they can get in the doctor's office, the idea is to equip the medical system to be able to refer to a network of organizations like behavioral health care, mental health care, things like that, that can support their patients to heal and to prevent some of the negative health outcomes that are associated with childhood trauma. But the other thing that we really focus on is building trauma-informed networks of care. And what that means is building up individuals, organizations, and systems that can acknowledge what I just mentioned, that piece of you're operating from a place of everybody is healing from trauma. And the system should be operating in a way that meets people where they are and caters to those needs in a compassionate and trauma-informed way so that people are not further traumatized by the systems that are supposed to help heal them. Um, and there are a ton of people doing incredible work in this space. And I think none of the work that I do reinvents the wheel. The work that I do is to connect and to fund and to uplift the work that's already happening in communities around showing up for your community in a compassionate, trauma-informed way. There are tons of organizations that, you know, need funding and need support and need to connect with their neighbors on how to best be there for the people that they serve. And so the work that we do in my 9 to 5 is around building those connections and building those connections also specifically between the healthcare sector and other sectors, such as the nonprofit sector, right? Because there are nonprofits that are serving people in a very tangible way. They are, helping families get housing or helping families get SNAP benefits or things like that. And then there are these healthcare organizations or health plans or providers that are serving people in the doctor's office that are maybe seeing people when they're sick or when they need a child well visit or things like that. And so some of the work that we do is around building those connections so that people can live in systems where they can fluidly access all the different services that help them live their best life.
I love it. I feel like this is such a this is such a conversation that could go like 5 million different ways. So like I have
I
like
know,
a
sorry.
thousand. No, no, no. I'm saying that to say that I'm first off so interested in this topic, but second off have so many different questions, yet so little time. So I'm going to quickly say something that popped in my mind just now, and then ask you a follow-up question. So what I wanted to say is like I feel like this might be more like speaking personally, but I feel like trauma is a word that just feels so intense.
Heavy. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels so heavy. And personally, like I never liked using the word. And when people would say, like, I have trauma from this or childhood trauma from that, or maybe it's your childhood trauma referring to me or saying, I'm like, bro, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, chill out with that word. Like in my head, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't say it. So like I wanted to Google it real quick because in my head I was like, I feel like can't there be like positive traumas? Does everything around trauma have to be like a negative experience, or does everything like if I go outside and I trip and I fall in front of a group of people and I'm sort of embarrassed, like is that trauma? And if it is trauma, like does it have to be a bad thing, or can it just be something where I'm like, oh, all right, I tripped and fell. I'm sort of embarrassed and I move on with life. But I just want to like quickly read so I typed it in and it said trauma refers to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms a person's capacity to cope and causes significant psychological and emotional harm. That was like a generalized answer. It gave a whole bunch of examples from a severe physical or psychological injury, a distressing event that disrupts a person's sense of safety or security, an event that causes intense fear, helplessness, or horror, an event that leads to significant changes in person's thoughts, feelings, or behavior. And all that makes sense as trauma to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, all those things could definitely be traumatizing, impact you, and like stay with you for life, make you make different types of decisions, make you feel more unsafe or more safe around certain people or people that look a certain way, or when people say certain words that it can evoke an emotion because of something that happened to you in the past. That all makes sense. Um, but at the very end, it says it's important to note that what constitutes a traumatic event can vary from person to person. Some experiences that may be traumatic for one individual may not be for another. And that really hit for me because I feel like what I need to learn how to do, and what probably a lot of people would need to learn how to do, but definitely what I need to learn how to do is how to respond with genuine empathy, interest, love, uh, curiousness, consideration, all these words combined, um, to people who have suffered, are suffering, have been impacted, are impacted by traumas that wouldn't be trauma to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like for me, I didn't, if I experienced that, I might be like, yeah, whatever, and move on with life and I might be fine. And so sometimes that gets in the way of me being able to be empathetic to others because I'm like, why are we using this strong word? Because for me it's not strong, but for this individual it is, and like being able to like get out of our own way so that we can show up for our, I don't know, our community. So I wanted to say all that to see what your response would be and what comes to mind when I say that, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question.
Lots of thoughts, lots of thoughts. First is that I totally hear you, and I think absolutely for a lot of people that word feels very heavy and can elicit a I don't want to talk about this response. And I think that to the point I was making earlier, there's a lot of organizations and people doing incredible work to number one, destigmatize some of the language that we use, because I do think a lot of it has been historically stigmatized, and therefore we internalize that stigma. So I think there's a lot of people doing incredible work to destigmatize some of the language we use around mental health. And then I also think there's people doing great work to rethink the language we use around mental health, because to me, I am not married to what we call it. I am married to the outcomes. My goal is for people to be able to learn how to positively cope with the things that they've experienced and to come out on the other side feeling and being better and healed. And so, in that vein, and I think many, if not all professionals in this space, are constantly in dialogue about what is the best way to talk about this? How does it resonate with people? How can we evolve our language to make this a more inclusive, a more open, a more honest, a non-stigmatizing conversation? And I think that's something that needs to continue to evolve. But I do think, I know in conversations that I've had with colleagues and with people in my field, we are very much grappling with how do you talk about these things, and not just in clinical settings, but also even, on social media. Like Gen Z, it's like we don't like the word mental health. We want to say wellness. We want to say, or whatever it is. That's totally fine. I have no problem with that. I think we should be using language that makes people comfortable and opens the conversation and is inclusive of all different types of people and experiences. So that to me would be my number one priority. Number two, I think to your point, one of the stigmatizing things about saying the word trauma or saying like you have this score on this screening or you have this whatever is that it can unintentionally imply that something is wrong with you. And we always at my organization use the, I feel like cliche maybe, phrase of like, you are not what happened to you, right? Nobody is defined by the things that they've experienced. Um, and just because you've experienced difficult things, that absolutely does not define who you are or where you will go. And one of the key things in our work, and one of the things that I think that is most important in our work, is to elevate what we know to be scientifically true, which is that just because you experience trauma does not mean that you are damaged in any way, that you are unable to recover in any way. I'm sure you know this from working in personal training, right? Like, not all stress is bad. Putting your body under stress at a workout, that's stress on your body, but that's not a bad thing. That's in service of your growth, right? That's in service of growing muscles and losing fat and things like that. And so the same thing is true for experiencing stressful events in your life. That does not necessarily mean that that's going to have a negative impact on you. There are a ton of factors, both intrinsic and extrinsic, meaning both inside you and also around you, that contribute to how you evolve from a situation. Some people are naturally disposed to have a lot of internal resilience and to move through challenging experiences and to learn and grow from them. Some people are not as internally disposed for that. Simultaneously, some people grow up in environments where they have really supportive parents, they have a great friend group, they have a therapist, they have all these things that even if they're not internally disposed to grow or to to have resilience, they have an environment that supports resilience and helps them move through that. Some people grow up with no resources. So even if they are internally resilient, they don't have the environments around them to help them heal. And none of that is people's faults, right? People are born into circumstances that have absolutely nothing to do with who they are as a person. And the levels to which people have supports to move through challenging experiences and also have the resources to do so are very layered with racism, sexism, classism, all types of things in our environments, right? And so um, all of that makes it complex. But everybody has the power to build resilience and to grow from experiences. And I feel like in the wellness world, it is our responsibility as professionals to do what we can to ensure that the people that we service have are able to build the tools to move through challenging experiences because like I said, all of us are going to experience hard things at some point in life and the goal is to be able to build that resilience, to be able to build that environment that allows you to move through in a positive way, to heal and to grow from that, um, those things.
I love it. I love it. I got like 67,482 more questions, but we'll 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 end it with these two. So, do you think, we're both personal trainers. You actively work in the public health space, but we're both obviously friends with or acquainted to or constantly in the same rooms as what we would call nowadays wellness influencers, uh, also coaches, just straight up coaches. Maybe they're not influencers, but trainers, coaches, strength conditioning coaches, PTs, DPTs, APT, all these types of individuals that contribute to the physical health directly, of their clientele, but then also for the on the influencer side of things are sharing information around ways to hopefully improve the overall health of, the individuals who are consuming it, the customers, the consumers of the content. But do you think that wellness influencers, coaches have a responsibility to educate on public health and not just abs and macros? And if so, what do you feel like is a good starting place from an education perspective for trainers and wellness influencers who simply like their background is maybe I'm a dietitian, I know about nutrition and dietitian like dietetics, or I'm a coach, I know about biomechanics and physiology, but they don't talk much else about other things that contribute to public health. So I feel like I asked like a 37-part question, but I'll just let you answer that however you want.
Yeah, no. I I might have a controversial opinion on this, but maybe not. So I which I'm sure you're familiar with too. My training in fitness taught me that we all have a scope, right? And that legally it is important to be working within your scope and to then build a team around you that you can refer out to when things come up that are not in your scope. And I raise that because I do think that it is valuable and important for people to understand their scope and to work within that. And I think it's valuable to build a team around you um, that you can connect others with when you don't know the answers to things. And what I mean by that is, say, I'm a personal trainer. I'm not a physical therapist or a dietitian. I'm not a registered dietitian. So legally and educationally, it doesn't make sense for me to be offering specific things that are meant for a registered dietitian to offer. And I am more than happy to refer my clients to registered dietitians when they have specific nutritional questions that fall in their scope. And I feel it's very valuable and important for us to lean on each other as wellness professionals to be that network of supports for our clients. I don't believe that it is people's responsibility to educate people on things that they themselves do not know about. I'm not going to try and educate people on physical therapy because there are other physical therapists who are way more qualified than me and more educated than me to do that. However, I do believe that as a wellness professional, it's important for me to understand my context. And what I mean by that is that nothing that I'm doing and nothing that my clients are doing is happening in a vacuum. And so if I'm going to be providing useful information to either my clients or the people that follow me on social media for workouts and health advice, then I also can't be ignorant to the things that exist in their environments that are potentially contributing to their health. So I'll use an example that I actually talked about on my story recently. Um, Again, may or may not be a controversial opinion. Recently, we've had ICE raids in Southern California. We have a huge immigrant population here in Southern California. We have a huge Latino population here. We also have a huge agricultural industry here. A lot of the agriculture is done by the communities who are also now victims of these raids. I am not an expert in immigration policy. I'm not an expert in agriculture. I'm not even a registered dietitian. However, as a personal trainer, as a group fitness instructor, my clients come to me and people who follow me come to me and say, "Hey, I want to lose weight. I want advice on how to eat. I do offer general nutritional advice." I'm a believer that if I am on social media offering people nutritional advice because it falls in the context of their health and well-being, then I also need to understand that it's difficult for me to say to people, well, you just need to be getting organic fruit at Whole Foods when I'm not acknowledging that the people who picked that fruit in the first place, their whole communities are under attack in my backyard. Or it's not, or I need to understand that maybe right now, my client who has family who is stressed about potentially being victims of these raids, maybe their challenge isn't that they're not getting organic food at Whole Foods. Maybe their challenge is that they're experiencing acute stress because of their family's predicament that is impacting their ability to take care of themselves. And so I don't think it's everybody's responsibility to educate on everything. And I don't think it makes sense for everybody to educate on everything. That's why we have each other. That's why we can say, hey, I know Collis, this incredible personal trainer who can help you with this specific issue that he's really good at. I think we should be using each other as a resource, but I also think, to my point earlier, it is. um, what's the word I'm looking for? It is important for us as wellness professionals, if we are genuinely trying to cultivate holistic wellness for our communities, to understand all of the elements that contribute to that holistic wellness and not obviously in depth everything, but I think it's important to be aware of your context.
Extremely important because I'll tell you what, there's the lack of awareness is typically what pisses me off about a lot of personal trainers when they're posting online or when I'm like overhearing a session. I'm like, oh no, he didn't just say that. And then in my head, I gotta be like, well, he must not know any better. So let's go. Let me go talk to him about it.
No, and I think
But
like my
yeah,
clients will laugh at me all the time because I categorize my style of coaching as like compassionate coaching.
yeah.
I'm not the trainer that's going to tell you you need to cut out food groups that yell at you for never getting out of bed and whatever, for telling you like I'm not a diet girl. I'm not, and not even for myself, for my clients too. But it's because I want you to build sustainable, healthy habits that work in your context. For me to tell you, you need to hit X macros every single day, and you can never go on vacation, and you can never have a Snickers bar, that's doing me and you and this whole entire mission a disservice.
Hmm.
So I'm very much less prescriptive, but I do think social media, what goes viral and what gets all this attention is people who are like, you need to do this really extreme thing for 5 weeks and da da da.
Yeah.
And that's not, then
And
that's what's going to make
that
people not
content would
healthy.
be that content would be so much better if they would just give some extra 20-second attention at the beginning and the end about, hey, like the goal of what I'm trying to do here is not to be sustainable. Like I'm not trying, and it doesn't even have to be in a weird way. Like literally,
Right,
like I'm trying to get as jacked and shredded as possible in the next
right.
12 weeks. My goal is not to practice sustainability or build good habits around living a long, healthy life. I'm specifically trying to dial in and be an extremely disciplined individual around cutting my calories to specifically get extremely shredded. This is not ideal for all populations, and I myself will not be. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
even writing
Yep.
it in the caption or throwing it at the end as a like a baseline disclaimer, anything could make it at least a tad bit better. Like I
Right.
mean, because as human beings, we're not always going to understand the context of content because of the background we're coming from. So I might watch a David Goggins video and be inspired because I like you know, the like, hey, like if you really want to achieve a high level of things in specific sectors, maybe it's like running fucking 200 miles or something like that. Or if you really want to be the billionaire on earth, then I would say it does require you to not be sustainable. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it requires you to do a lot of unsustainable things to become a trillionaire. You know what I'm saying? Or to become the best 100-mile racer in the country. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing
Yeah.
sustainable about that.
Yeah.
So I can contextually understand that as a trainer because I'm in the industry. I study this, I read about it, I learn about it. So when I watch that video, I'm like, oh, he's inspiring. I'm not like, I'm not doing enough and I'm a shitty person because I'm not hustling. But I understand why my clients feel that way. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? When they
Yeah.
watch that. So
A hundred
it,
percent.
yeah.
One of my pet peeve like content hooks on Instagram is the like lock in for 6 weeks, go ghost and show up as a brand new person. And I always talk to my audience and my clients about the fact that like social health and mental health are very important. If you shut yourself off from the world for 6 weeks, how does that impact you as an individual? And obviously for everybody, it's going to be different. But if you are the type of person that needs human interaction, and obviously, I know when people are saying go ghost, they don't mean like literally don't speak to people. But this idea that you need to self-isolate in order to be healthy, I'm like, that's not good for your social or mental health. You don't need to isolate or pull away from the world to be a better person. Actually, when you connect more with the world, you're going to show up better for yourself and for others. We need to stop telling people that they need to
Yeah.
be lonely and alone in order to build a fat ass. That's not
Right.
true. That's one of my biggest Social
Right.
media pet peeves is that one trope of like you have to do it alone. I'm like, no, you don't need to do it alone. Come to my
Yeah.
class. Let's do it with 20 people around. We're still going to do it. You're still going to get the results. And actually, you're probably going to be happier for it.
I love it. I love it. That's so true. I love everything about what you've said today, and I'm sure we could go on for like 3 hours, but
Yeah, for sure.
I gotta make sure that I don't hold, the short attention span of both myself and the audience.
Yeah. Fair, fair, fair,
But
fair.
no, I love this. Before we log off for the day, I got another question.
Hit me.
And it's only because I forgot to ask it. And you can literally say no comment and we can move on, or not no comment. That makes it sound like it's a crazy question, but NA. If there's a country or a community or a city or a state or a province or a county that you feel has done really well with building systems around public health, do you have an answer for that? Like a place that is well known for like having really good systems in place? Because you use that word system so many times. I was like, well, is there any city that is just so good logistically, from a public health perspective that they're like the place everyone is looking at to learn from, you know?
I don't believe that there's one place. There are places that have done a lot of things well, and simultaneously, because different communities are different, it can be hard to translate
Mm,
results.
yeah,
There is an initiative called Blue Zones that highlights some of the
yeah,
places
yeah.
that people live really long, and there has been some great research around how that has come to be. And then there's also been more research about what that actually looks like logistically. I would say that the systems in the United States, as they stand today on a large scale, are not super conducive for public health. And that being said, there are still so many incredible organizations and individuals dedicated to improving health and well-being. And so, while there's not one city that I would say this is the model of health, I can think of 10 organizations in Los Angeles off the top of my head that I'm like, they really do incredible work. Even though in LA, we still face challenges with homelessness and with food deserts and with education, and the list goes on. Um, so I would say that there are a ton of organizations in LA and across the country doing absolutely incredible work that is mission driven, that is comes from the community, that is like based in what the community needs, what the community wants. And I think those organizations should be uplifted and funded and should be leading the charge in building some of our bigger ecosystems. And I think that the work continues.
I love it. I love it. Great answer. Could you please let the people know where they can find you, how they can support you, your efforts, the company you work for's efforts, your personal business, just anything you want to share. This is your moment to shout out anything and everything.
Absolutely. You can find me on foreveryoungfit.org or on Instagram at foreveryoungfit_. You can find online programs there. You can join my in-person classes. You can DM me to chat about how to build your healthy lifestyle or how to build better public health ecosystems. I am here for any and all conversations and here to be a resource for anything that people want and need health and fitness related.
I love it. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there looking for opportunities to contribute financially, contribute with labor, show up and help here in LA, and for organizations who are contributing to the public health of your communities here or elsewhere. I'll try to get as much information as I can from Ms. Young here and put it in the description of this podcast once we post it. That way, you guys can click on links that might be helpful for you to learn more about public health or ways for you to be of service. With that being said, my name is Kyle Stutzer. This is Haley Young. We are out of here.